You're listening to the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast. Today is another episode in our husband series titled The Hidden Toll: How In-Law Stress Affects Your Health. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast is your sanctuary for navigating these sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, Miriam Susan here. Welcome to another installment of the husband series that I've been doing. If this is the first time you're tuning in and you are a husband, I would encourage you to go back a few episodes and tune in to those to get an idea of what this series is all about. And if you want to know a little bit more about me and my story, please reference the very first episode of this podcast to get my backstory. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about how stress with our in-laws affects our health. Now, if you are a husband listening to this episode, then the in-laws that I will be primarily focusing on will be your parents. Now, you can also have, of course, possible issues with your in-laws, with your wife's parents. So I just want to focus on the idea that having stress from extended family does affect your health. So I want to go ahead and jump in and start talking about some of the things that happen and the impacts of stress, whether it's within your family or without. But there's just seems to be something a little bit different about stress from extended family because we do have some control over that stress. If there's stress within your marriage, if there's stress because of issues with your children, that's a little bit harder to compartmentalize and push aside to allow you to focus on your healing. But when it comes to extended family, there are boundaries that you can put into place to allow for some healing. So, what is chronic stress? Chronic stress is something that I have dealt with for pretty much our entire marriage. My husband and I have been married for 28 years, and the stress actually began when we were dating. And so we're going back to 1995. So we're looking at 29, almost 30 years of stress that I've had to deal with. And so that would be considered chronic stress. The difference between acute and chronic stress is something that's chronic, happens over a long period of time. Acute is something like in that moment. So an example of acute stress might be you almost got in a car accident. You saw a bad pileup, you were swerving, you veered off the road. That would be an acute stress situation. Chronic stress is having to deal with behavior that is unacceptable, overwhelming, anxiety-inducing for a long period of time. Chronic stress can be particularly damaging because it raises your cortisol levels, it raises certain stress hormone levels, adrenaline. And when those are raised for more than just acute stress, it can start to cause lots of other health issues. It can cause issues with hormone imbalances, which is something that I have been dealing with for quite a while and trying to get ahead of it, get on top of it, get better for years. But because I have been under stress for so long, it's going to take me quite a while to heal and get everything back into normal ranges. So chronic stress can be damaging because it does affect your hormones, and your hormones control everything in your body. Now, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about how toxic or just demanding, controlling, or manipulative family dynamics can contribute to ongoing stress. Now, there's a lot of scenarios in toxic family relationships where there's stress. It could be just an underlying level of stress that occurs whenever you spend time with your parents, and I'm addressing the husbands right now, that your wife feels. It could be because she feels like she is constantly being judged. She can feel like she's constantly being put down, manipulated, controlled, treated badly. Any of those things can contribute to ongoing stress from your parents. Now, I'm not saying that only your parents add stress to your wife. Absolutely not. We just live in a very chronically stressful environment as a whole. Our world is stressful. There's so many things going on. There's a level of stress that we really can't do anything about. We can't really affect what is going on in the rest of the world, and we have stress that happens within our family. If we have issues with our children, if we have a child who is special needs, if we have a child who is sick, if we have a child who's just going through a rough patch, maybe it's a toddler. That's a time when your stress levels can just chronically be high. And then you add on the stress from grandparents, in-laws, parents, that really can sometimes push us over the edge. These dynamics of having family members that we know are critical of us, know that they don't like us, even if they're like the situation with my in-laws, who would probably say that they love me and that they are so grateful that I married their son. Their actions spoke louder than words. There was always an underlying tension. There was always this level of scrutiny, of judginess that came along with any visit. And that created, for me, a constant state of having to be on alert. Like I was constantly walking on eggshells around my in laws because I never knew what was going to be the thing that would cause a reaction. And so that contributed to my constantly being in a state of stress, chronic stress with my in laws. That can also cause anxiety because you're feeling anxious. There is this anticipation before a visit about what is going to happen this time. And so those are the kinds of things I'm talking about when I say chronic stress. Now, one of the things that will happen if you do have issues with chronic stress, where there's stressful situations with your parents, with her parents, with extended family, and it lasts a long period of time, it will start to manifest into physical symptoms. I want to be very clear that if your wife feels like she is in a constant state of stress, if she is constantly anxious around your parents, she probably has some of these physical symptoms that are showing up. They might be headaches, tense muscles, fatigue, not being able to sleep well, digestive issues, having a weakened immune system. All of those things can start to happen due to chronic stress. For me, I would have surges of adrenaline because of the anxiety of anticipating a visit with my in-laws. Then I would have butterflies that would give me like digestive issues. I would have migraines, headaches, muscle tension, and I would just be really, really stressed out during their visit. And usually towards the end of the visit or right after they left, my hormones would come down. There wouldn't be that surge of adrenaline going through my body, the surges of cortisol going through my body, and I would have a crash. I would have an adrenal crash. And the worst crash happened on the very last visit that we ever had with my in-laws, because we are now no contact. We actually now have a protective order against my in-laws because of the things that they chose to do. But I was in bed basically for 3 days after their last visit because the stress level was so high that it literally just threw my whole body out of whack. And I was basically bedridden with migraines and an adrenal crash for 3 days. Now, how this stress affects other things like mood, cognition, and your relationships, well, it doesn't affect them positively. I'll tell you that. Unfortunately, it ends up where you might notice that your wife is more irritable around the time that your family is visiting or you're going to visit your family. You might notice mood swings. It's because our hormones are out of whack from the stress. You might find that your wife has difficulty making decisions and just thinking straight. And again, that's because of the stress. The stress hormones kind of shut down our ability to think clearly. Brain fog is a huge thing that happens when you are super stressed. And then you probably already have noticed this, but there can be a strain on your marriage and other friendships because she's just trying to get through the visit. She's just trying to get through those days. She's just trying to get through, and it's really taking everything that she's got just to barely function. And so she's going to be more irritable. She's going to have trouble thinking. She's not going to be thinking clearly and making the best decisions that she could probably make because of this stress. And so, yes, there will be strain on your marriage. And it's not just because of your parents, it's because of how your parents make her feel and how they stress her out that causes all of these issues. Now, one of the things that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but definitely is something that needs to be addressed, is the impact on the intimacy in your marriage. Now, if you have little ears listening, I would encourage you to put some earbuds in at this point or to pause it and come back and listen at a later time when the little ones are not around, because this is a topic that does need to be discussed. There is a strong connection between your wife feeling safe and her desire to be intimate with you. When wives feel safe, they will be more willing to initiate or to participate in intimate relations with you. Now, if your wife feels like you are prioritizing your parents over her, if you're prioritizing decisions that your mom or your dad want to make over your marriage, it is going to create a sense of insecurity. And I will tell you that a woman who does not feel safe because her husband is choosing his parents over her, making decisions that favor his parents over her and their marriage, that is going to increase her feelings of feeling unsafe and seriously decrease her libido. Stress, high stress, does affect libido. Now, chronic stress leads to elevated cortisol levels, and elevated cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone, can suppress sex hormones. There was a study in the Journal of Sexual Medicine that said women with high stress levels were 2.6 times more likely to report low sexual activity with their partners. So, if your wife is super stressed out, don't be surprised if she just wants to go to bed and not do anything else, because she is using up all of her energy, all of her emotional, psychological, her sometimes physical energy that she can just to cope with the stress. And having sex is not even on her radar because that's not a survival need for her. And she is probably not going to be interested. I really want to emphasize that if you sense that your wife is feeling stressed out by your parents, and this is something that happens on a regular basis, and there's no particular reason for the stress, it's just general stress. Like, let's say it's not stress due to, let's say, a family funeral. It's just stress all the time. This is affecting your marriage. This is affecting your intimacy because your wife's stress hormones are decreasing her desire for you. And it could be that she doesn't feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, we don't want to go to bed with anybody except to go to sleep. So it is very, very important. It is crucial to maintain a healthy, intimate relationship with your spouse. I think that pretty much goes without saying. If you want to have a strong, loving, solid Catholic marriage, you may inadvertently be undermining that when there are times when you choose your parents over your wife. And it could be something where you don't even see it as choosing your parents over your wife. It could be that you just think, oh, well, yeah, I agree with what mom and dad are saying. I'm just going to go along with that. To your wife, it might not feel that way. It might feel like she's getting pushed aside. You're just going to do what your mom and dad want you to do. And too bad, so sad for her. So this might feel like I'm coming down a little hard on you, and that's not my intention. I just really want you to be aware of what really is going on, or what could be going on with your wife, and why maybe she's a little cold towards you lately. And maybe you don't understand why. If there's an issue with your parents, probably there is if she's sent this podcast to you to listen to, then there could be some sources of feeling unsafe for your wife where she feels like she's number two, falling behind your parents, and she doesn't feel safe and doesn't want to be intimate with you. Now, I would encourage you, if you have not listened to the episode of the podcast talking about the proper order for a Catholic family, I highly, highly encourage you to do that. That episode was based on a conversation that my husband and I had with a Catholic therapist, and it was really, really eye-opening for us to know that there is a hierarchy of relationships in our lives. And I will tell you that God is number one and your spouse is number two. Your parents come much further down on the list. So, highly encourage you to check out that episode. But let's get back to how in-law stress can be affecting your marriage and affecting your life. Now, one of the things we have to do is recognize what the symptoms of stress are. Some of the signs I've already mentioned, but I want to add this in just for emphasis. There are some specific signs to look for where maybe your parents and the stress of being around them is affecting your wife's health. Physical symptoms, again, we've mentioned some of these before: fatigue, headaches, migraines, changes in appetite, changes in sleep patterns. Maybe your wife gets so stressed out that she doesn't eat and then she gets sick from not eating. Or maybe she's an emotional eater and she feels like the only thing that she can control right now is what she puts in her mouth. And so she tends to overeat because of the stress. There are also some emotional symptoms to be on the lookout for: irritability, anxiety, and even withdrawing from activities she once enjoyed. So maybe your wife used to enjoy going out and playing tennis with her friends. And all of a sudden, even though the weather's been great, even though her friends are still playing tennis, she's kind of pulled back from that because she doesn't enjoy it. There can be a level of depression that comes with being under so much stress because you feel like there's no way out. I felt like that for so many years. I felt like there's no way out. I cannot do anything to help my husband see that his parents are being controlling and manipulative, and he doesn't seem to care about how it affects me. He doesn't seem to think that it's really that big a deal. And it was a very, very hopeless time in my life when I felt like I'm stuck. I'm stuck. My husband is choosing his parents over me, and I don't know what to do. Now, praise God that my husband did see, after a massive adrenal crash, the last one being after our last visit with my in-laws, he saw that it was actually taking a physical toll on me. I pray that it doesn't come to that for you and your wife. I pray that this episode opens your eyes to some of the things that are going on so that your wife doesn't have to suffer as long as I did, because we were married 23 years before we went no contact with my in-laws. And we had planned for it to just be temporary. We just needed a break. I just wanted a little bit of time of not feeling like my in-laws were going to show up again. We had to start planning the next visit. We had to start planning the next time where they could come and see us. I just needed a break. And then things just, they went crazy from there. So I would encourage you to be self-aware. You need to pick up on some of the things that are going on, and also be open to communicate with your wife. I would encourage you to pay attention to the changes in your wife, in her behavior, and her moods, and her physical state leading up to, during, and after visits with your family. Your home, your marriage should be a safe place for honest conversations between you and your wife about family stress. No, it's not easy to hear that your spouse doesn't love your parents in the same way that you do. But you married each other for a reason. You're forsaking all others for your spouse, including forsaking your parents. And your wife needs to know that she can talk to you and have a safe conversation with you about what's going on. So let's talk real quick about some healthy coping mechanisms, some healthy strategies for dealing with stress. First of all, we need to prioritize the marital relationship and set clear boundaries with extended family. You, as a husband, might not be used to setting boundaries with your parents. My husband had a very enmeshed relationship with his parents where they wanted to know everything down to the little details. And there is a time and place to share certain details with your parents, but they don't have to know everything. And it's not being rude, and it's not keeping secrets. It's just, you know what? They're your parents. And now there's a different relationship that you have with them. You're not the dutiful son. Now you're a husband, and you're possibly a father. And those roles have to come before the role of son. So you have to set some clear boundaries with your parents to protect and prioritize your marriage. I would also encourage you and your wife to both have open communication and practice active listening. And active listening is basically letting someone talk and then kind of repeating back to them what you think you heard. So your wife could be saying some things about how the last visit went with your parents, and you could turn around and say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you don't like when my mom comes in and takes over the kitchen, and you would like for her to just kind of take a back seat and allow you to run the kitchen even when they visit. That's active listening. So you're participating, you're making sure that you are hearing and understanding what your wife is saying. Another thing I highly encourage you to do is to get some professional help if it's within your budget. Find a marriage counselor or do some individual therapy. Look for options that can work for your family. Then another thing to think about for managing the stress of dealing with in-laws is the importance of having some self-care. So think about some ways that you can support your wife's self-care. Now, that doesn't just mean saying, okay, well, go get your nails done or go take a bubble bath. Find out what works for self-care for your wife. Not everybody likes going to get their nails done. I don't like going to get my nails done. Sometimes I'll do a bath, not really big on my priorities, but one of the things I like is just going out for a drive. It might be just going to the grocery store by myself without any kids in tow. Everybody's wife is going to be different. Everybody has their certain preferences for what is self-care. find out ways that you can support her. Self-care might be a massage, or self-care might be taking a walk by herself, might be doing some gardening, might be doing a craft that she loves. And then another part of self-care is boundary setting. Think about ways that you can help support your wife and maybe her own boundaries to help reduce stress. So for me, one of the things that I pretty much had to do every day for many, many years is take a nap. Why? Because my hormones were all messed up. And so that was a boundary that I had with my in-laws where if we were visiting them or they were visiting us, I needed to have a couple hours in the afternoon to be able to lay down and just decompress. Because if I didn't, I would end up with a migraine and I would end up absolutely miserable for the rest of the day. When we had little ones and they needed naps, I would often take a nap with them. And that was a boundary too, because it was special time between mommy and whoever the child was that needed a nap. And that was it. There was no crossing that boundary. And so think about ways that you can help your wife practice self-care, even when visiting your parents, even if your parents are staying with you, so that she has time to reduce her stress. So I don't want to end this podcast without giving you some practical ways that you can help your wife. Now, sometimes we don't want help. Sometimes we don't want you to step in after a conversation and have a list of ways that you're going to fix things. Try to do the active listening, like I talked about before, without trying to fix everything. Sometimes your wife, believe it or not, just wants you to listen. She just wants to feel heard. She just wants to feel understood. And if you're trying to throw out solutions left and right when she's just trying to get things off her chest, that might add to her stress instead of alleviating it. Another way that you can really, really support your wife is to take on different household responsibilities to reduce her overall stress. If your wife is like me, she has a constant updating running list going on in her head of all the things that she has to do. It could be taking out the trash. It could be taking the leftovers and getting rid of any spoiled food from the fridge. It could be figuring out what your meals are going to be, staying on top of the laundry, staying on top of washing the sheets and the towels, taking care of the yard, walking the dog, feeding the pets, changing diapers, setting doctor's appointments. All these things are constantly going in your wife's head. And if you have the ability and the time to take something off of her list that would reduce her overall stress, that would be wonderful for her. She would be probably so grateful for you doing that. Now, another thing that is probably the most important part of supporting your wife when dealing with difficult family members, it's presenting a unified front. And that means if there is an issue between your wife and your parents, you are a team with your wife. You're not in a team with your mom and dad, period. If y'all make a decision about maybe your parents really want the kids to spend the night at their house and your wife is adamantly opposed to that, don't go to your parents and say, well, she doesn't want the kids to spend the night, so not really a big deal to me, but she doesn't want to do it, so I guess the answer is no. No, 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 no. You need to present a united front. My wife and I, whatever her name is, we've decided that the kids are going to spend the night here tonight. They're not going to go over to your house tonight. End of story. You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to give all the details. Just, no, that's not going to work out for us. And use us and we in the statements instead of I and she. That's a lot better. That presents a unified front to your parents so they know that you are a team. So they know they cannot divide and conquer and drive a wedge between you and your wife, because sometimes parents will do that. Parents will try to drive a wedge between their child and their child's spouse. And I don't understand why, but I've seen it myself. I've experienced it myself, and it's not healthy. If you want to be the strong Catholic man who is the leader of your family, you have to present a unified front when there are situations where there is somebody, one of your parents, not seeing eye to eye with something that your wife is expressing her opinion about. Another way to support your wife is to, again, prioritize your marriage. Find a way to take your wife out on a date. Don't make her plan it. Take her out to dinner. It doesn't have to be somewhere fancy. My husband the other day just took me out for ice cream, and that was so special. It wasn't expensive. I mean, the ice cream was expensive, but it wasn't an expensive, big deal. It was just, let's go off and just the two of us find time to spend just us talking and spending time together. Also, you have to find ways to make decisions as a team, especially when it involves extended family interactions. If there is an issue with one of your kids playing soccer and a family gathering, you and your wife need to talk about it and decide which one is more important. Together. Together, together, together. Remember, we have to present a unified front because we are one flesh. When we are married, we become one flesh. That is a huge way to support your wife. Let her know that you've got her back. So we've gone through a lot. I know I probably came off a little strong in certain areas because I'm so passionate about these things. I have lived this. I have lived and am currently still dealing with chronic stress from issues with my in-laws. I mean, I was dealing with stress for about 24, 25 years before something happened, before my husband took a stand and told his parents, we just want a break for a little while, in order to give us time to heal. And you can't expect your wife to be under stress for so long, for many, many years, and then it get better overnight. That's not how it works. It takes a long time to reset hormones and to reset how she thinks and deals with stress. If she's got anxiety, if she's got some depression that goes along with it, there's a lot of healing that has to happen. But I want to thank you and encourage you that your wife is reaching out and asking you for help. She wants to be unified with you. She wants to be on the same team with you. She wants you to stand with her. And that's why she sent you this podcast to listen to. So God bless you for listening to it, for validating your wife by taking the time to hear these words. And I pray that you will take some time to process it, to take some time to really think about everything that I said. It might not all apply to your situation, but some of it does. And so I would encourage you to spend some time, talk with your wife, talk about what we discussed today, what you learned today, and find ways that you can help support her so that she's not in this constant state of stress. So God bless you. Thank you again for listening. Go in peace. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you've ever wondered just how toxic your relationship with your in-laws really is, I've got the perfect tool for you. Introducing the new free Toxic In-Laws Assessment, a self-graded quiz designed to help you identify the true level of toxicity in your relationship with your in-laws. Whether you're unsure if your in-laws are really that bad or you think they might be worse than you realize, this assessment will give you the clarity you need. Don't leave it to guesswork. Take the free Toxic In-Laws Assessment now and start your journey towards healthier and more peaceful family dynamics. Visit desiringpeace.com/quiz to get started. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and or services is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.